Hi, this is Ken Lewis with P3 Training and Consulting. Today we're going to talk to Ed Monk from Last Resort Firearms Training. Ed does an active shooter threat response class training session that is really great. And Ed is the keynote speaker and trainer at the 2023 Texas Handgun Association Annual Conference. We're going to spend a few minutes with Ed, get to know him, and we sure would like to see you at the Texas Handgun Association Conference in Kerrville, May 19, 2021. Go to texashandgunassociation.org. If you have any questions, go to info@texashandgunassociation.org. I'm Ken Lewis again. I'm also the Texas Handgun Association Vice President, so you probably ought to be there so I can keep my job. All right, Ed, hey, thanks for joining us. And, this is interesting, this active shooter threat response. Many of us have been doing this for a number of years, and you've really taken it kind of next level stuff. So I got a few questions I'd like to ask you, spend a couple minutes with you, but first tell me who is Ed and how did you get into this business?
Sure. Briefly, I'm a retired Army officer. I'm a former high school teacher. I'm a current law enforcement officer and a current firearms trainer.
Army officer, school teacher, you see more combat as a school teacher than an Army officer? I'm thinking. Okay. So
no, because actually the two schools I taught in were pretty good schools.
Good schools. Well, good. All right. A few questions, Ed. And again, thanks for your time. What is the most important thing to consider when planning to counter an active shooter?
It's very simple. It's math and time. Unfortunately, we get distracted to other things like emotion and politics, but it's very simple math and time. And this should come as no surprise. The longer we let an active shooter shoot, the more victims we're going to have. On the other side, the more quickly we stop his attack and stop him from shooting, the fewer victims we'll have. I haven't met anybody yet that says they want more victims, not less victims. So we should all agree that the solution to this, the best thing we can do, is to stop the shooting attack as quickly as possible. So our plans have to go turn 180, our organizational plans, and basically it's churches, schools, and businesses and government offices. Most of them have to do a 180 turn from what they're doing now. What they're doing now is call 911 and wait on somebody to come here and stop this. We have to change that to we're going to stop it.
Okay, so that transitions to what I was going to ask you next is, in these organizations, what is that biggest problem you see with them in responding? And that is that hope aspect of that we need to get them out of hoping and praying. Not that you shouldn't pray, but what practically now is that big problem with these organizations we've got to 180?
Well, the problem is they're not looking at the only factors that matter, which is math and time. They're not considering that. And again, it should come into a surprise. It seems pretty plain. If an organization requires a 911 call in order to stop the active shooter, if their plan to stop the attack requires a call, the average shooting rate of these active shooters, they'll be past 10 victims before the first 911 call is made. Absolutely. So any organization that requires a phone call, they're going to have double-digit victims by default. By the time any police officer on the radio gets a dispatch from that 911 operator, the victim count will be at 15 to 20. By the time the first law enforcement officer arrives because of that dispatch, you'll be past 25 or 30. And that's our country's default system. And that's why we repeatedly see victim counts in the high 20s, 30s, and 40s, because that's what our country's default system is set for us. So we have to change the default system. We have to plan for a low victim count, and the only way, it's not here are 3 ways to do it, and I'm going to give you my preferred of the 3. There's only one way that you have a good chance of a low victim count as an organization, and that is a plan to immediately counterattack the active shooter and stop him in the first 30 seconds. We have to make this plan, and then we have to war game it against what's coming. We have to war game it against an evil, motivated, creative, thinking, adaptive enemy, because that's what's coming. It's not the enemy that if you lock the doors, he'll shake the doorknob and go, oh darn, you locked your door, so I guess I'll leave. Right. He's not the kind of enemy or threat that's coming that you can talk him out of it. And I get so many calls after Uvalde asking me to come teach them how to talk the guy down and de-escalate it. And that's the solution we would want, because that's a peaceful solution, but that's not the solution that stops this thing.
Top-notch negotiators around the world that do a great job at barricaded suspect and hostage negotiations. And I was on a SWAT team, when I was active. And so being able to talk a person out is a talent in and of itself, but we are way past that. The active shooter, and synonymous or not, I call them active killers in my training. So we have active threat, active killers. They may or may not be shooting. And so the active shooter response is that whole run, hide, fight thing that we've been teaching people for so many years has to have an emphasis. And I do this in my class, and tell me if you agree, that my emphasis is run, hide, fight, 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 and so much more in the fight, because that's where the killing stops.
Yeah, I don't teach run, hide, fight. I teach fight, flee, barricade. Fight is best for humanity. It may not be the best for each individual. And one time I was speaking, and a guy said, I got a 5-year-old in pre-K. You tell me I got to tell my 5-year-old daughter she's got to fight. No, everybody doesn't have to fight. Somebody has to fight. And they're going to start in a crowded place. So all we need is one or two. The sooner somebody fights and stops him, the lower the victim count will be. And a lower victim count is best for humanity. So fighting's not the solution for every single person, but it needs to be the solution for the group of victims.
Yeah, amen. And so let me ask you a third question here real quick.
Yeah.
What should an armed citizen do to prepare for an active shooter attack? This is Texas, man. Everybody carries a gun, is the big illusion. So outside of our predominant cities, it's fair to say everybody carries a gun, but still the cities are less armed, less prepared. But what is that message that we need to send out, not just to Texas, but the message that, look, if you're an armed citizen, which we have all across the country, what do they prepare? What do you want them to do to prepare for that active shooter attack?
I think there's three things. One thing is they need to understand this threat and how it differs from, say, the mugger, which is what most citizens who carry outside the home are preparing for. Understand this threat, this fight, and the environment of the fight. The confusion until you find him. Up until you find him, it's going to be confusing. Once you find him, it won't be. You're very likely to be outgunned, because many of them start with a long gun. If it's indoors, you're very likely to have this going on with the fire alarm going off, because fire alarms go off when guns are fired inside often. You have a greater chance of a longer distance shot. Muggers are going to be 3 yards. The active shooter, there's many cases where, whether it was a cop or an armed citizen, they had a very long shot. Chance of a body armor. Now, not most of them, active shooters don't have body armor, but some of them do. The chance of round two. So round one is you shooting them to the ground. Round two is if they want to keep fighting, either from the ground or getting back up. And that's happened several times.
Sure.
And then rule number 4, safety rule number 4. Be sure of your target and what's in line with your target. We talk rule 4, but we don't train rule 4. We talk rule 4, we take tests on it, you have to know it, and then we take you out to a range where there's nothing between you and your target, and there's nothing behind your target but a wall of dirt to catch bullets. Right. So we talk about it, but we don't train it. So we have to put it in our training so we understand any bullet we shoot at the active shooter that does not stay in his body is a potential problem for other people. Even if you can't see them, because a lot of interior walls are drywall and you may not see anybody behind the shooter, but in the next room there could be people, and that's actually happened in a mall in California. Second is optimize your gun for this fight. You're going armed. If you want to be armed, prepared for this fight, not just the mugger in the parking lot, then choose a gun that's optimal or at least adequate for that. So I'm not saying you couldn't stop an active shooter with your North American Arms 5-shot 22 or your LCP or your J-frame, but I wouldn't want to fight the fight with those things. So optimize for this fight. And last, know your capabilities. And I think a lot of people carrying a gun do not know their capabilities. And what I mean is, at what's the max distance from a target, you can get 100% center hits. Not usually, most of the time, on most days, but you can get 100% center hits, because that translates into that's how close you have to get before you start slinging rounds in a public place, because of Rule 4. You can't do a 15-round mag dump at him and hit him with 6 of them and say, well, good enough, I stopped him, because what about those other 9? So that's what you have to do. You have to know your ability with your current skill and your current gun that you're carrying.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't want to take any more of your time. I really appreciate that insight. And we look forward to having you at the Texas Handgun Association Conference.
Thank you
May
so much for
19th
inviting
through
me
the
to it.
21st. We're really honored you're available to come and willing to come. And Ed Monk from Last Resort Firearms Training, we really appreciate it. Thank you for your time, Ed. And hey, if you guys want to get a hold of Ed, at the bottom of the screen is his phone number. You can call or text him. There's his email. Ed's one of the guys, the last 3 guys using AOL. So hop on that. You can send him an email, and certainly you can get him on his personal Facebook page. And I guess you have to like the Phantom of the Opera, because that's his little icon picture on there. So Ed, again, thank you. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in Texas.
Thank you so much.